Hello and welcome to New Consciousness Activation. Today we welcome Tania Prince. Tania, you are an empowerment coach and an EFT founding master. Welcome. I'm very happy to have this conversation with you today. So would you like to add anything to that very brief introduction?
No, I'm totally happy with that. I like always to keep things very simple.
Okay, wonderful. So let's start with the basics. So EFT founding master. So we're going to talk about the founding part in a minute, but let's define EFT to our viewers, those that don't know what EFT is about. Can you give us a little bit of a definition?
EFT is like, they often say it's a psychological form of acupressure. It's a very, very powerful technique. It's based on a very old understanding, an ancient understanding of how the body functions. And it gets some incredibly powerful results. So like acupuncture, acupressure, it involves the meridian energy system of the body. And with EFT, we tap on acupressure points whilst we tune into the issues that are blocking us from living the life that we want to live in life. And the beauty of that is that, interestingly enough, this is fabulous to know as well, that we can often clear those blocks and naturally, without effort, we can then begin to become who we really are, our true selves, our empowered self.
Yeah, it's truly kind of a miraculous technique. So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and it does deliver what it says. I mean, sometimes you have to put a bit of effort in. Not everything is delivered on a plate.
Right. Well, yeah. So you mentioned that you're tapping on the meridians. So that is interesting. Can you talk about what meridians are in our body? I think people are familiar with the earth meridians, maybe, but what are the meridians in our body, and why are they important?
The kind of energy circuits in our body, and you know, like we have veins and arteries where blood flows, we have energy, the flow of energy through our body. And energy is very important because it is at the foundation of everything. So if you're able to change the energy and information that's going through your body, that's kind of controlling your body, if you can do an intervention at that level and change that, then you come into a better place. So they're the energy lines. And in EFT, what we do is we tap on specific energy lines that run through the body, meridians, and where they come near the surface. So we do a gentle percussive tapping at the points where those energy lines are more near the surface.
So so you compared it to, or you said it's sort of psychological acupressure or acupuncture, right? So, in acupuncture, the needles go into those meridian points, right?
Yes.
We are a little more gentler. We don't stick.
I would say, yeah, we do not use needles.
Right.
We do not need to use needles at all, because what we're doing is using gentle percussive tapping, generally with our fingertips. And we get some very powerful results with that. And I also think, you know, because we call it emotional freedom technique, yes, we do clear emotions. And we see some beautiful transformations in people. However, what people may not realize is that we work on a vast range of issues right across the board. Many people will come with issues such as physical problems, pain issues, and yet we still use EFT. EFT is just a powerful technique, I think, that works with the whole of human experience.
And do you have an answer for why that is?
I could give you many answers. Let me think of keeping it as simple as possible. I think what happens is we have experiences in life. We're built to survive. And that makes sense, doesn't it, really, that our mind-body system has these kind of instinctual survival instincts. So what happens is we have experiences in life that maybe are threatening to our survival, but our unconscious mind perceives that way. It's not a conscious thing. We don't think, oh my, this is threatening to my survival.
Right.
It's automated, as it should be, because we don't want to have and take up that time thinking about a threat. We need to be able to deal with it instantly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what can happen is some threats that we come across are very disempowering to us because, you know, you can't always get out of a threat situation. Your mind and body system might perceive that you can't escape it, so you feel helpless, powerlessness, or whatever, and it will literally, at that point, you'll almost go into a freeze response. So because your mind then thinks, oh, let's conserve your energy, because then turn you down, conserve your energy, and then you survive another time. Yeah, you get on with life, and maybe you'll get out of this situation by doing that. And what happens then is the energy from the fight or flight experience can become locked in the body as we go into this freeze response. And then as we go through time, that can result in almost like your energy not flowing as it should do because you've got all this excess energy going on. So with EFT, what we do is we tune into that and very gently tap on the acupressure points and bring us back to a balance point where we come back to the normal place we should be. So we do not have that excess energy trapped within our body, the emotion of what we've experienced in life. And it's interesting enough, if you have experiences in life where you felt powerless, helpless, and went into a freeze response, that if you do not find a way to release that from your system, it's almost like the mind and body system keeps that running in the background as if it's still happening to you. Mm-hmm. So time does not heal it. As many people will come to me and they say, well, that was so long ago. And I'll say, well, when you think of it now, what happens? And almost instantly, some people burst into tears. Right. And I think, well, you know, if it wasn't still impacting you, you wouldn't burst into tears, would you? If you were totally at peace about something, you would not have those emotions coming up. So, you know, time doesn't heal. If you've gone into those kind of responses, really, it's about just bringing the body back to a safe place. And EFT is very beautiful for doing that. You know, we're just tuning in, tapping, and rebalancing.
And it absolutely makes sense because in a quantum world, and we've been talking in these conversations about quantum experiences, time really does not exist. Everything is happening at the same time. So it absolutely makes sense that if we haven't cleared something away, then it continues to persist within our system. And if we see ourselves as energy beings, then it absolutely makes sense to adjust the energy system or energy composition of ourselves to just let go of the things that got trapped into it. So I'm wondering if you could show us some of the tapping points for people who haven't experienced it. It might be interesting to see just how simple it is.
All right. Well, typically when we're using EFT, we tune into a problem. And so that would be the first thing. So I'll show you the tapping points as I show you how you would tune into a problem. Mm-hmm. For example, right now, say you had a pain on the shoulder here. Mm-hmm. Yeah? And if you think about that pain and you bring your awareness to it, you might think, oh, it's a clenching pain, or it feels like a tight knot in my shoulder. So, you know, mainly you bringing your attention to that is tuning into that. I mean, typically with EFT, we'll also say the words that represent the problem. So we just keep our attention and awareness on the issue as we start. So once we've found a way to tune in and direct our mind towards that specific issue, what we then do is we tap on the karate chop point here. It's also called the side of the hand in different places on the internet. So we tap here with gentle percussive tapping, and we use a standardized statement, which basically is, even though, and then we use the words that represent this problem. So, yeah, if it was a tight feeling in my shoulder, so even though I had this tight feeling in my shoulder. And then we use a little bit of an affirmation in the back end of that, such as, I accept I feel that. We generally repeat that 3 times whilst tapping on this particular point. So even though I have this problem, I totally accept I feel this. And again, even though I have this problem, I totally accept I feel this. Then we get two fingers, or at least I prefer two fingers. And we go to the inner edge of the eyebrow here. And we tap very gently on this point, nice, gentle, percussive tapping, and we say the words that tune us into the problem. So if it's a tight feeling in the shoulder, again, we'd say this tight feeling in the shoulder. And then we tap on the side of the eye, point here, it's on the edge of the ball here, edge of the eye socket, and we say this tight feeling in my shoulder. Central under the eye, we would say this tight feeling in my shoulder. Central under the nose, this tight feeling in my shoulder. On the chin here, in the indented area, this tight feeling on my shoulder, in my shoulder. Get your fist and tap on the collarbone point and say this tight feeling in my shoulder. The next point would be under the arm, roughly about 3-4 inches down from the armpit, central. And again, just tap on that point, this tight feeling in my shoulder. So that would be classed as a round of EFT. Now, what I didn't do then is initially, before we would start to do that, we would do an assessment of whatever the problem is. So if when you brought your attention to the feeling in your shoulder at the beginning, I would actually ask you on a scale from 0 to 10, how intense is that really right now? Once you've done a round of EFT, you would go back to it and say, now, when you put your attention on that, how intense is that right now? So then you'd methodically go back, tap again, until you've noticed some kind of change in that. Now, it may be that you're able to clear it 100%. That can happen. Or it may be that that feeling might shift location or move around. That can also happen. And we just methodically follow the EFT until we notice the improvement that we want to have. And for some people, it will be very fast. Others, it may take longer. It's different people, you know. And that issue, I was using the shoulder thing, or the idea of something in your shoulder then, but we can work equally the same with emotional things. So again, it's just about tuning in and then tapping in that standardized way so that we begin to balance the system.
Yeah, and let me ask you before we move on, do you do the top of the head?
You can do. Well, you see, through history, if you go down through the history of EFT, originally when EFT first came out, you did the sequence that I just showed, similar to that. But we also tapped on the finger points. So I think we use a lot more tapping points. Then it got shortened to the sequence that I used then, and even at that point, I think some people were using what they call the top of the head position, and different people will use different points. The ones I use there are generally used with most kind of variations of EFT. But the EFT, the top of the head position, covers several of the meridian points. So a lot of people do put it in, sometimes at the beginning of the sequence, sometimes at the end of the sequence. It just depends on preference, really. So some people do like to use it. Some people, I have actually come across an occasional person who refuses to use that point. So
refuse.
Yeah, refused. Because it's about belief systems and what you believe about the different points, which is fine because EFT is stunningly adaptable to these different points. What I would also say is it's all about results, isn't it? And if you're not using this position here and you're getting results, does it matter?
No.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, one of the things you mentioned that it could be used for physical issues, but it could be used for other areas. So let's talk about that, because I have seen people use it for really a wide range of issues like money, abundance, clearing trauma, a wide range. I use it myself with my clients. I use it for myself. For example, if I am upset about something, or I just need to calm myself down and just kind of in the moment clear away stuff that I don't need to feel in the moment. I use that very easily. So it's really sort of a technique that could be applied to anything. So can you talk about kind of the things that you've used it with, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about things. I use it right across the board, as you just mentioned there. You're talking about tapping in the moment. A great technique to tap in the moment, because it's quite easy to tap on yourself. And personally, myself, I do use a lot of tapping techniques to balance me in a lot of different situations, because, life does happen, doesn't it?
It does.
Yes. And it's beautiful, really what you're looking at is that you can go with the flow of life, whatever, in a good way. So it's a brilliant coping technique, a brilliant technique that you can use on the go. So, and I don't have an issue with people actually watching me if I was to do it, because big deal. They're often quite curious. And actually, I've tried this out because I did an experiment once. I went in a big gym that I'm a member of, and I was just sat on one of the machines, and I did tapping. And I tell you, no one was interested. No one. They were all involved. Most people are locked in their own heads a lot of the time. So I don't even think I got noticed doing this. Not that I was bothered, but and I've worked with clients, such as I had a client who came with his leg from the knee down to his toe was black. So a big skin discoloration, isn't it? Yeah. And interestingly enough, the reason for that was that he'd had a hip replacement operation. And he was about in his 70s, 70 years old. And he came to my clinic, and his outcome, what he wanted to achieve was, he said, my pleasure in life is going on trains, traveling the country, and just visiting places. That's what I love to do. And he said, before this problem, I was able to do that. But then I developed a problem with my hip, and I've had this hip replacement. And now, he said, I'm in pain, and I cannot travel across the country. And so with this particular guy, I used the EFT with him, and I said, interesting question this, because you think to yourself, well, he's got a black leg, but I'll tell you the question I asked. How do you know you have this problem? Because I could look at it and say, it's a black leg. He knows he's got it. No, it wasn't. That wasn't what he answered. What he answered to me is, if you were to take your hand an inch away from the base of my foot, I would be in pain.
Wow.
Interesting. So, and interesting, because I love to hear people's different, perceptions of their issues. So we began to tap on that. And he was great, because this guy had been in the military in the UK at some point in his life, an engineer. So he followed instructions very well. And I'll tell you this, he was in his 70s. He perfectly just got EFT, because what we did is we said, well, how do you know you've got it? You got this sensation here when I do this. So we just tuned in via the sensations he was having. We tapped and said, so even though I have this, however he described the problem, and we did exactly what I did a few moments ago, and we tapped right round, and I said, now what's happening with that? And it's very interesting, because he says to me, after about one round of EFT, he said, oh my gosh, that is amazing. He said, it feels like something's being dragged up my leg. Very graphic in his description. And what it brought to mind in my mind, how his description came to me was, it's almost like energy circuits reconnecting. So just so descriptive of that. And then I said, all right, now at the very beginning, you said when I brought my hand about half an inch, 1 inch beneath your foot, you felt pain. What's happening now? Well, within a session that was roughly about an hour long, he ended up later in the session hopping around the room on that leg.
Wow.
Because I'm kind of in a very beautiful clinic, I says to him, well, why don't you open the door and show the secretary? It's like, let's spread the happiness here.
Right.
he opens the door and he's showing how he can hop on this leg. And there's an osteopath who works in the same clinic, and there was another man outside who'd also had a hip replacement operation. And I think that was the moment I discovered all about hip replacement operations. And the interesting thing is, you know, what you're looking at there is what we'd established is we had this change within that moment. Because from the beginning of the session to that point, it was a phenomenal change. And I'd only used a specific approach in EFT called chase the pain, which is a very methodical approach and very targeted. So we're just targeting the sensations he's experienced in his legs through the description of the sensations. If you remember, EFT is about tuning in and tapping. And that's all we did, a very simple version of EFT. I phoned that guy up a few weeks later because I wanted to know, how does this hold over time? And he said to me, you know, totally happy with where I am with this. I'm back traveling over the country. And he said, if I get any twinges of pain, I just tap. I don't care who sees me. I'll do it walking down the road if I need to. And he had a tapping diagram up in his room. He told me that. And he was ecstatic. He was very, very happy, this guy. But I loved his attitude about that because he saw the benefit in using this technique. So that's a story about a physical problem.
Yeah, and you know, one thing that came to me as you were talking is I want to bring the attention to that second part of the sentence. So the first part is, even though I have this problem, but the second part is very important, and it may seem kind of mysterious. How is it that when we say that we accept something, and I usually use the words, I love and accept myself, or love and accept this issue, how is it that that's what changes, you know, that contributes to the change? Can you talk about that idea of loving and acceptance, and how, you know, that it's actually turning into healing, it's a healing method almost?
That's a really good question as well. By the way, not everyone has to do that. Yeah, and the beauty is, for some people, what they find is if they just tune in and tap, they will get a result, which is fantastic, so they can do less work.
I make my clients work.
Good. I think it's good to have a good work mentality. However, you know, when we got issues, sometimes there's maybe unconscious blocks or other programs that we run that maybe are fighting against our healing. For example, if you don't accept that you've got this problem, you've got almost like a counter program fighting against what's going on for you. And that can keep you stuck. So once you do that back end statement, to some degree, it deals with any resistance to letting the issue go, to some degree. And almost like, if you think of the issue, it almost like opens a door for healing in that moment, which can be very powerful. So when I was talking about a physical problem, I kind of use the words, I accept, I feel this. Because most people will say, yeah, I do feel it. So in a way, just accepting it almost like opens the door to allowing them to release it quicker. I like the one that you use, I love and approve of myself. Was it? I love and approve of myself?
I love and accept myself.
Which is a beautiful one as well, because really, at the end of the day, we should all be in a place of loving and accepting ourselves without a need to be perfect. Because as a good colleague of mine has often said, we're all perfect as we are. Yeah, and I love that statement. However, many people don't accept themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Many people don't love themselves. Some people actually hate themselves. And you know, if they can get to that place of loving acceptance, even with their issues, it puts them into a better place of flow, and it helps them release issues far better. Because some people's strategy for trying to get rid of their problems is to kind of kick themselves in the head, beat themselves up. I don't think that's going to work. Yeah?
Right, and you know, one of the things that, and I don't know if you've ever used it, but another way of approaching it isn't, because yes, many people find it very difficult to even say the words I love and accept myself, because they have like an internal resistance to it. but to change the words a little and to say, I am open to loving and accepting myself, or I'm willing to love and accept myself, which sort of gives you a little bit of it removes you from the immediacy of loving, but at least it says that you're willing. And do you think those words would be acceptable?
I love those words, because what you're finding is, say someone comes and wants to work for something as simple as a phobia.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start saying, I love and approve of myself. Well, that might be the huge, big issue.
Right.
And they don't love and approve of themselves.
Right.
And so once you use those words, it might fire that huge issue up. However, if they've come to you and say, well, really, I've only come here to work on my phobia.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of highlight that big issue that they have there. You still need to work on the phobia, because the thing is, that's their expectation of what they want to achieve. That's what they want. Mm-hmm. So in a way, you have to bypass the resistance to those words.
Yeah.
And what you brought in was, I'm open to the possibility. Right. A lovely way of bypassing it. Of course, there are a few ways that you can bypass it. I always like this one as well. So, say you tap and you say, even though I have this problem, I love and approve of myself, even if I don't.
Oh, I haven't used that one.
Now you see how you laughed.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah. And that brings up a beautiful energy of laughter.
Uh-huh.
And laughter can be stunningly healing. Absolutely. In many cases, it's a natural release mechanism, and it's almost like we can almost laugh at ourselves with that statement. I do find that works quite neatly as well. And what you find is, on that back end part of the EFT statement, you can also use it to I choose. Mm-hmm. You can say, I choose, even though I'm this way, I choose to be this way. So you can actually use it as a directionalizing statement towards what you want to achieve. So there's a few things you can do with that back end of that. But, it's the flexibility of EFT. It's a very powerful technique, which, can be done in so many different ways.
Yeah. When you said I choose, I got a chill. So to me, that's a sign that it's powerful for me.
Beautiful words, because we don't resist I choose, do we?
Right.
As long as it's our choice and not pushed on us. Yeah. As long as it's not pushed upon us by the person working with us.
Yeah, pushes it ourselves.
Yeah. You think, what would you rather have? What would you rather have going on here? So even though you've got this, what would you rather have? And then it becomes a choice. And I think all empowerment is about having a choice in life, being in a beautiful place of choice, so that you are empowered to create that change in your life in such a lovely way.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So how about another example, maybe from a different area, not physical? Have you ever worked with other areas of life? Abundance, let's say.
I work with them all.
Okay. Let's find another juicy example.
There are so many juicy examples. I'll bring up a couple just to give people the range of that.
Okay.
I mean, the fastest, I would say, and I use this example because she gave me permission to share this. The fastest I ever got a result with EFT was many, many, many years ago. I've had many fast results, but this one just sticks in my mind because it was kind of entertaining as well. She came with interestingly enough, a phobia. And she was in her 60s, and she was intending to go to North Africa. And her phobia was of spiders, I believe. But it was spiders, cockroaches, frogs. So I think it was any kind of insect. And the reason why she chose to get rid of this emotional issue, this fear issue, was because she now got divorced. And while she had a husband, she could easily just scream, shout, get her husband to come over and deal with the insect. Oh, wow. However, now she didn't have that. She needed to deal with the issue itself. So that's why she came at that point in her life, before she'd been able to avoid the issue. And she came to my clinic. In fact, she only came to my clinic when I guaranteed, or did my best to guarantee, there would be no insects in the room. That is how petrified she was.
Oh my
And
goodness.
the interesting thing is, you think about that, this is a fear that had been there since she had been a child. Now, typically we think that the longer we've had it, the more work required to deal with an issue. That isn't true at all, because it actually took about 2 minutes to clear it. It took more time just finding out the details of what you want to achieve, etc.
Right.
When we begin to and by the way, what we had to tune into wasn't just the idea, so even though I have this fear of spiders, it was, so even though I'm frightened of how spiders move, because they move in a very erratic way. And that is a trigger for many people. So we tapped on that. The whole thing collapsed instantly. And she knew this because what she said to me is, it's gone. She said, I just felt my whole chest relax. So prior to the tapping, this had been very tense at the thought of spiders. And she said, and my palms of my hands, they were sweating, even at the thought of this. She said, they've just suddenly stopped sweating. And as anyone who's in this kind of business, you know, the person you're working with may say it's gone, but you have to prove it's gone. And I usually make my clients prove that it's gone. So we went through all imagined scenarios. I said, well, imagine this one over there behind the bin. She looked at me, she said, not bothered. So I think she was developing an attitude. And she said, I said, imagine there's one on the ceiling, because I think what I was thinking is, what's my worst case scenario?
I know.
She said, I'm not bothered. I said, well, imagine it's right above your head. She said, I am not bothered. I said, imagine it's falling in your hair. She said, big deal. I just grab it and pull it out. And I'm thinking to myself at this stage, I would be bothered.
I am bothered listening to this.
I think she's actually better than me at this point. But interesting thing is, she left the clinic and she gave a call back to the clinic and said, I've actually gone into my garage, because she need then real life proof. Right. She went into her garage, moved the box, came across a spider and left it there. People with phobias don't do that, because they're petrified, they can't get the thought out of their mind. And the thing is, after I tapped on the fear that she had about spiders, we then had a beautiful discussion and continued to tap, by the way, on the Lion King. Because if anyone has seen the movie of The Lion King, it's a beautiful metaphor for everything, every animal, every person having a role in life. Right. It's the circle of life, isn't it? Right. And I just thought, spiders, there's a reason spiders do something very beautiful. They deal with flies. Flies are quite unhygienic, and I prefer a spider than a fly in my house. We had this beautiful conversation, but whilst tapping, that's actually called conversational tapping, and actually creates a very beautiful shift, but it's a very gentle way of doing it as well. And she left that spider there, and she actually said in the conversation, I remember that conversation we had about the circle of life. So I left the spider there to deal with the flies. And weeks later, I followed through and checked, where are you now with this? She'd gone to North Africa, where they are substantially, I would imagine, bigger spiders over there. And I asked her, has there anything happened? She said, well, one night there was this stick insect. And she said, and we just covered it. And in the morning, we let it go. Now, typically, like I said, people with these issues do not do that. No. They can't do it. And the final question I asked her, has anything else changed in your life? Because what people do not realize is, yes, she's very aware of the fear of spiders, cockroaches and frogs, which all have the same movement, by the way. And I said, has anything else changed in your life? And she said, interestingly enough, I'm more calm driving. And I thought about that. Yeah, the issue we worked on.
The erratic movement.
Yeah, which does bring to mind how bad was her driving, doesn't it?
Or maybe she was afraid of other people, how they can impact her driving.
Absolutely, because maybe it's about control, not being in control, right. etc. Who's to know where that issue truly did come from? But what you're looking at is profound change right across, even though it was a lifelong issue. 2 minutes really, a massive shift that stayed over at least the length of time when I did the follow-up. I haven't really followed up since then, and that was many, many years ago. But I would imagine if it stayed at that point, we have a very deep transformational change. I wouldn't even regard that kind of thing as a big kind of issue for people. What you're looking at is maybe feeling down and depressed in life because of the knocks that people have had. That could be a substantially bigger issue. And, you know, I had a guy who came to my clinic once. He was so down and depressed in his life because he ran his own business. And he'd taken a few knocks on that business, so he was getting divorced in his life. Him and his wife were going through this, who's going to have the children, what we're going to do there. And he was becoming bankrupt. He couldn't pay his employees. And he was going through legal litigation with an ex-business partner. So all of these things had just got right on top of him. He came to my clinic and just sat down. And I asked him a very simple question. What do you think I'll do? He said, I do not have a clue what you're going to do. He said, but I've been told that the stuff you do works. So he basically just gave me permission to do whatever I wanted to do.
Well, that's fun.
Absolutely, it was fun. It was great because I said, which of all those issues you've had happen in your life is the biggest one for you? That would make the biggest difference for you right now if we were to work on that. And I think he really said to me, it's the divorce. So what we're looking at is all the energy of that affecting him. He was quite a religious man. So I think he'd been brought up Catholic. And, you know, I don't think that's an acceptable thing. It can bring a big pile of emotions if you're going through a divorce and you've got those religious beliefs behind that. So we started to work on EFT with that, and within 1 minute, he noticed a phenomenal shift happen. He felt totally different within the sessions. I remember that very clearly because what you're having is a very, very big issue and a very fast result with this man. And I continued to work through the session, and he just felt so much better. But it was like shocking to him. Like he went from being almost flat on the ground or feeling that way to feeling very elated in a very beautiful way. And I saw him a couple of weeks later, and he never even mentioned the divorce. In fact, you know, you talked about using EFT for law of attraction and stuff like that. You know, his energy has totally shifted regarding the divorce. And I think then he came into a place where he could deal with that. And there was a very different energy between him and his wife. And when he came for the second session, he never even mentioned that because he'd resolved it. So he went out of the session with such a different energy around the issue, and they were able to beautifully come to a good understanding about that. And so then we worked on the other elements of that. I think within 3 sessions, he'd been offered a new job as a manager. And this is not 3 sessions over 3 weeks. They were far more spread out than this. He sorted out the bankruptcy, paid off his employees, and really got into such a good place. He couldn't have done that, I think, unless we'd have cleared all that blocked energy because it was weighing him down so much. He couldn't think. He was in a very confused state. And I think once you've had a lot of things happen to you, it's almost like the weight of the world's on your shoulders. And that's where he came in, with the weight of the world on his shoulders. And he literally felt like he was flying and floating. And that's an energy shift. That is an energy shift. And, you know, he's just in a far more resourceful place to really be empowered by the technique. So, again, typically when you're classed as having depression like that, and he was on medication for it, so it's proper clinical depression state, and he came off of them himself very shortly into the treatment, and he felt great. So he made a profound change in his life. I would say if anyone does come off their medication, they should ideally consult with their doctor. Do it the proper way.
Yeah, and what that brought to mind is this, comparison to the psychological treatment, when people go and meet with a psychologist, and it often takes years to kind of talk through the issues and figure out the best solution, or figure out or change someone's perceptions. And I'm not saying that psychological treatment is not valuable. Definitely there are some people that kind of need to go through that. But there are all these alternatives that are coming up now that actually say it doesn't have to take that long. You don't have to carry this emotional weight on your shoulders for that long. You don't have to put extremely hard work into it to really change your perceptions or change your life, or to clear things away. But there is a much easier way, and much faster way, and it's all these things that you call energy psychology. It's the work that brings together the energy work with the sort of psychological adjustments. That I think is wonderful. I mean, I think for people who, and in the modern age, we want quick results. We don't want to spend years on changing ourselves. So I think it just works wonders for people who are ready for much quicker results, to experience these alternative ways of really clearing things and moving forward in their life.
Yeah, and that does bring up a really good point, by the way, because most people try and resolve an issue by trying to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go for understanding, as you know, there I can see.
Well, yeah, and I understand where you're going. That you don't actually have to understand it to clear it. Yep.
Exactly. You see, understanding it, many people can understand everything about their problem, every detail, but they still have the problem.
Right. Yeah.
And, what you're looking at is you don't need to understand an issue to clear it. So what you're looking at is you're looking more at the energy that drives the problem. Mm-hmm. The energy that keeps the problem going, this unresourceful state within you. It's about shifting that, because then sometimes understanding comes. Yes, sometimes we do then truly understand our problem, although we're not too bothered by that, simply because if you haven't got a problem, why do you need to understand it?
Yeah, and I just thought of an interesting, I guess, a metaphor for this. If our viewers might be familiar with Cryon, it's a channeled energy, and one of the examples that Cryon uses is when we get into a car and we get ready to drive. We do not understand all the ins and outs of what's happening in the engine and how the fluids are flowing and where the spark is happening. And, some of us have absolutely no clue what's going on, under the hood. And yet we know that if we turn the key on or press the button or however it turns on, we're going to get from place to place. And so we just use that to get to the places we need to go. We don't have to have the understanding of a mechanic of, the process and how it works. And it's a similar, situation here. You don't have to understand every little detail to allow for it to work. In
fact, I love that metaphor. I have heard that metaphor before, and it's a perfect one for this. The thing is, if you started to drive your car and you were running those ideas of how the engine worked through your mind as you were driving,
right?
I would not want to be on the road with you.
Yeah, you'd be very preoccupied.
You would be up here in your head thinking that too, wouldn't you? And it probably is an even better metaphor, because if you're up here thinking about that, I think at some level you can be even further away from healing yourself, because really what you're looking at is many things need to be done automatically, So if you're driving your car, you just flow with the experience, and you can drive very beautifully without knowing how that engine works. and you're paying attention or being aware of the things you need to be aware of. And that's what you're looking at. So really, it's getting you into the optimum state to drive the car in a beautiful way. And I think this is also the case here, is about getting into that optimum state. You don't need understanding of the mechanics of the car to drive the car, as you say. Really, all you're looking at is, what is that thing that I need to shift in order to allow me to come into the optimum state, the best place. And it's the energy.
Absolutely. Yeah, beautiful. So I want to ask you a question before we talk about other modalities. You are the EFT founding master, right? The master level, and you were working with the original, with the person who created EFT.
Yeah. Well, what happened was years ago, the developer of EFT, Gary Craig, developed what we call the EFT founding master. Well, he called it the master program, but we call ourselves the founding masters now because there are many different programs that class themselves as EFT masters, but they may have only done something like a 3-day training, which is very different from what we did, which was Gary Craig originally wanted to identify people who were at an expert level in EFT. So in order to even be accepted, to be tested, to prove you were at that place, which was what the founding master program was basically, is you had to have extensive experience of having worked with people. And so you had to have worked with hundreds and hundreds of people at that point. And they went and took us through an intensive testing experience. They checked that we knew how to use EFT and reframing, in other words, to be able to combine techniques in a very beautiful way to get beautifully fast results, that we knew everything about EFT. We even had to demonstrate using EFT and in front of the Gary Craig himself. So very challenging program. So, but worthwhile because we had to prove that we had the extensive experience. So there, I did that program and got acknowledged as a founding master, an original EFT master. And I think there were 29 people in the world who got through that program. So that was a while ago. I think there's a lot of work involved in running that program, so they stopped the program at a certain point because it was so much work involved in testing.
Right. Wow. Okay, so I'd like to ask you about the technique or the method that you created, the inner repatterning. Can you talk to us about that?
All right. Mindfulness-based inner repatterning is a very simple technique, and because I like to keep things as simple as possible, and because I do think that we work in a simple way. The mind is not. It depends on what level you come in. There are simple ways to just allowing the body to heal itself, because healing is self-healing. It's about just taking away the blocks that stop the body and bringing it into its own natural state. So the technique I developed was to help people do that in a very simple way. And it's a mindfulness technique in that it tunes in via awareness of how we know we have an issue. For example, right now, if you were to think, how do I think of it? If you think of something that's an issue for you in life, whatever that, I'm not going to ask you what it is, by the way. But if you think about something that's an issue for you, a question that we would use to tune a person into that is, how do you know you've got that issue? And the way we know we have issues is that maybe we have an image in our mind, a memory, a feeling, a sensation, maybe internal dialogue or sounds. So we know because of the information that's coming through our sensory systems. So in a way, we can then become mindful of that information. And that helps us tune into that. What we're then looking at is we tap, and there's a really great point to tap, which is on the thymus point on the chest. You just tap here now.
We can't see it. Can you?
Oh, yeah.
The camera.
Yeah. If I go here, where the two collarbones meet, and I go down. I bring this down. Yeah, about
There you go. Yep.
yeah, about there. And I tap here. Nice gentle percussive tapping. That's a thymus point, and there is actually an acupressure point just slightly lower than that, which deals with big emotional states. But the thymus point in there. So with this technique, you only need to use one tapping point, which makes it very simple. You do not need to understand an issue, because remember what I said earlier on, understanding a problem doesn't clear it. So we cut out that stage completely, because all we need to do is tune into the problem. And we don't need to go into the problem to tune in. We can just become mindful of how we know we've got that. And if we then tap on this point, bring our awareness to our breathing, we begin to come into a safe place. So if you put the problem out of your mind for a moment, you tap very nice and gently on this point and breathe, you come more and become more present in the now, right now in this experience. And you begin to come out of your head, out of our thoughts. And what really helps us to do that as well is, if you know about the mechanics of how the body functions, your eyes are directly connected to your nervous system. So they can act as an on-off switch to fight or flight response. So what we can do there is gently tap on this point, and if we kind of look into the distance with our eyes, choose something to focus on, and then just soften our focus and allow ourselves to come to the peripheral vision. So we begin to just allow our eyes to gently, naturally come out and almost like get surround vision. But you know when you're doing it properly, because there's no strain in their eyes, you can be guided by the fact that it actually feels nice to do it. And what you're then doing is you're turning off the fight or flight response and coming more into the present, into the now. And if you breathe, come into the peripheral vision and tap on this point, you become a lot more present. And we call that the safe place. It's a place from where we begin to release wherever needs to be released in order to allow us to be more present in life on a normal day-to-day level. Does that make sense?
Yes, and is that the heart center, would you call it? It's a little bit hard for me to kind of figure out, but is that kind of where the heart chakra would be, I guess, or the heart center?
I call maybe the higher heart chakra.
Okay.
And so it's a very heart-based technique.
Right.
I think the heart is so important, isn't it? You know, I think a lot of people think it's all about the brain and their thinking. Yeah.
Well, we've talked about the heart in our conversations here, so yes, I think our viewers are aware at this point of the importance of the heart. So it seems like absolutely you're just bringing your mindful attention to the heart.
The heart is very key, because the heart can regulate the whole body. You know, it's beating and it's sending out signals right through the whole mind-body system. And when the heart comes into a coherent state, an optimum state, it can pull everything within your mind-body into balance. So the thing is, when I said I like to keep things simple, let's work with the master switches here.
Right.
Yeah, it's a master switch in a very beautiful way. So you don't have to try and make yourself think differently. What you look at is to just come into balance, and you will think differently. You will feel much more solid, cohesive, grounded in a very beautiful way. So you just switch in the mind-body system into its optimum state and releasing what is blocking you being in that state by using the tapping and just bringing awareness and also intention, because your intentions are instructions. And that's how the conscious mind should be used. You don't need to use the conscious mind to understand your issue. Use the conscious mind to tell the other part of your mind, my intention is to release this.
Right.
It's like, you know, it's that general, I suppose. Yeah,
right.
This is what I intend. Now let me do this. Let's help me do it. Yeah. So it's a very beautiful technique for just doing that, but it does tend to feel very gentle whilst we do it, because I think we need to keep people feeling very safe whilst they're clearing these things, because, you know, ideally we don't want to go back to the things that happened in life that didn't feel good. We just want to release them in the most gentle way possible. So I developed the technique for that because, you know, I do work with a lot of complex things, but my thoughts are life is for living, you know, to really be in a very beautiful place. So, you know, what we want to do is have a really nice, gentle technique for enabling us to do that in a very, very gentle way.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you. So I wanted to ask you also, you use the technique called BSFF, I believe?
No, I don't really use BSFF. Yeah, I was trained in it many years ago, and it is a brilliant technique as well. And I think, you know, which you train in many different therapy techniques, they all inspire you in different ways. And the BSFS was developed by Larry Nims. Brilliant. He was a contemporary of Gary Craig. And I think the man who developed the technique before that they both got involved with, was a guy called Dr. Roger Callahan. And he was a very big pioneer in this field. And both Larry and Gary oh, both brilliant, by the way. They both attended Dr. Roger Callahan's course, and they both independently came up with different techniques. Now, BSAT Free Fast is a beautiful technique, and initially it involves some tapping. But what Larry Nims discovered was that people were tapping on all the wrong points.
Oh, okay.
And still getting results. So he became very curious, and he said, basically, it comes right down to very powerful, the power of your intentions.
Absolutely.
And, you know, once you got that power of intention going on, and that's why, even with mindfulness-based inner repattern, you set your intentions. The power of your thoughts can really make a huge difference. And working with your unconscious mind, which BSAT Free Fast does that. Literally, it works in a very beautiful way. So I don't particularly practice that. I have in the past, but I do think it is a brilliant technique. I think they're very inspiring, some of these things like that.
Well, what I find amazing is that all these techniques are coming up, and they're amazingly simple. As you mentioned, and there are things that, you know, it's really good to go to a specialist who can help you and guide you in learning how to use them appropriately. But these are things that people can use, you know, on a daily basis themselves. And I think putting that power into people's hands and allowing people to really be empowered versus depending on somebody else to, you know, guide them through life all the time is really a wonderful direction in which we're all moving. So I'm excited about the fact that people can be empowered to really sort of fine-tune their lives on a daily basis on their own. So I wanted to ask you, we were talking in these conversations about activating our consciousness, and this was, you know, I think very much in line with that, and the potential of humans as we move forward, as we continue to activate our consciousness. So what excites you about our potential, about where we're heading, and what's possible as we continue to be, you know, to evolve and to become more conscious?
I think to me, what really excites me is that more people, you know, about discovering that the power does lie within us, that we can make tremendous shifts within ourselves. And I think just knowing that is empowering. Just the knowing of it, because, you know, continually we are bombarded with different messages that tell us this, tell us that, and they're kind of, for the most part, quite disempowering thoughts that are put to us, say, if we watch TVs and stuff like that. But the reality is we have tremendous potential within us to be masters of our own destiny. And, you know, it's not about force, it's not about pressure, it's not about pushing forward. It's about coming to a very beautiful place, which, you know, there's a beautiful book called Power versus Force. And it's a great book to read because, you know, too often we try and use force to get what we want, where in reality we have more power if we do that in a very different way. And if we do it in a way guided by how good we feel, you know, when we're feeling great inside, there's a real beautiful feeling. We're on track. So it's very simple. Just be guided by your feelings. If you feel fabulous, I'd say you're on track. If you find, oh my God, it feels like I'm going through a treacle here, well, maybe there's too much effort being put in, and just kind of go back, simplify things, maybe become more still, and use these beautiful techniques just to come into your own power.
Right. Thank you. Well, Tania, this was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it. So before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you, what are you up to these days? Is there anything you want to bring to our viewers' attention? I know they will have your website, and I know you're running workshops right now. Is that correct? Or trainings, I should say, for EFT.
Yeah, I run EFT. I train people as practitioners in EFT. Advanced practitioners, normal practitioners. I train trainers in EFT. So they're always very beautiful experiences because we have a lot of fun on those training courses, and lots of laughs, a few tears sometimes. That is the nature of life. But we have tremendous transformation. I also run training courses in mindfulness-based inner patterning. And again, it's very beautiful, very transformational, and you know, yeah. So that is where I'm going at this point in time. Just really enjoying bringing these techniques out to the world and working with more people, and you know, it's just very beautiful area to work with.
Well, Tania, thank you so much. This was just wonderful. I really enjoyed. I learned a couple of new things about EFT that are really fun, and I think it's so incredibly powerful that you're empowering people to have this control in their life that many of us sometimes don't feel because we're so overwhelmed by issues. So thank you so much for your wisdom and your knowledge and the loveliness that you bring to this world.
Thank you very much. I like that. I'm going to take that with me all day long. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.